My fusion system, fusing 1,000 chickens at the start. Chapter 541, Rebuilding the Fortress City. What are you doing? Fox inquired as he discreetly yawned while covering his mouth with his hand. His eyes were clouded with unmistakable weariness. The fortress city had just been liberated from the grasp of the Elven army. He had a lot of work to do as the city lord. Furthermore, his wife had been resurrected from the dead. He did not get much sleep because he and his wife had been intimate for an extended period. He was drifting off in his office that morning, staring at the mountains of paperwork on his desk. Finally, a soldier informed him that Watson had a question for him. He skipped breakfast and dashed toward the Golden River. Watson was at the riverbank and studied the people on both sides of the river. He had not said anything, so it was not proper for him to inquire. After standing on the riverbank for half an hour, his hands and feet felt numb. He could not help but inquire. Lord Fox, can you tell me how you feel about the current fortress city? Watson did not explicitly respond to his inquiry. He turned around with his hands behind his back and smiled. How do I feel? After a brief moment of startled silence, Fox said, the current fortress city is more than 10 times stronger than before. I am feeling pretty wonderful. He stared in the direction of the Golden River as he spoke. 100 massive, pitch-black submarines were parked there. Those submarines played an important part in the combat against the Elven army the previous day. Those submarines had already become a component of the fortress city. Many sea folks had arrived out of nowhere, their fishtails swinging. They were holding enormous boxes. Some of the crates held food, while others held clothing and weaponry. Fox lauded Watson's vision of the Golden River. He brought his family to the riverside after his wife was resurrected to get water for them to drink and have a relaxing bath. He possessed the strength of a gold-tier elite and also a tremendous protective shield similar to gold-tier armor. He also visited Watson's idol at the newly built church in the fortress city. He had expressed his trust toward Watson and received a wonderful gift in return. He was formerly a warrior cultivator. He possessed diamond-tier knowledge as a warrior, but he also had the capacity to practice magic. He learned to be a dual cultivator with a warrior's and mage's abilities. In the fortress city, there were many people like him. He would be able to advance to gold tier as long as he drank the water from the Golden River. At the time, the fortress city's population was essentially greater than platinum tier. He would be able to get superior knowledge as long as he continued to believe in Watson. Everyone would advance to platinum tier. That was something the Holy Dragon Kingdom, which had boasted less than 10 platinum tier elites, could not consider. However, given Watson's ability to generate things like the Golden River and even resurrect the dead, it was not surprising that he could increase a person's strength to platinum tier. Is that it? Watson persisted in his question as if he was not happy with Fox's response. Is there anything else? Fox had a puzzled expression on his face. There is one other thing. I have not acknowledged you adequately, Your Highness. Don't worry. We will never forget what you did for the city. If you desire something, just say the word, and I will do my utmost to fulfill your request. It is quite rare to come across someone like you who is exceptional in skills, wisdom, and kindness, all at the same time. My admiration for you is like the Golden River, which flows indefinitely. Watson's query, in his opinion, was presumably motivated by a desire to receive his appreciation after accomplishing so much. Some of his words were compliments, and most of them were genuine. Everything Watson had done was something he would not even consider. It was not an exaggeration to describe it as a miracle. Many of the city's citizens have shifted their beliefs from the 7 gods to Watson. That must have something to do with Watson's actions. Do not sing my praises, Lord Fox. I don't want to hear that. The fortress city might have gotten stronger, but it is still insufficient, in my opinion. The elves have earned the ability to live after drinking from the spring of life. However, possessing platinum tier strength is inadequate in the face of a 100,000 Elven army. If the elves return now, you will not be able to keep going on your own. His purpose at the fortress city was to force the elven army to leave so that he could deal with the Winter Nation's threat. He would not be able to attain that purpose if the residents of the fortress city were unable to repel the elven army. As a result, there was only one thing he needed to do right then. Your Highness, what you mentioned made perfect sense. Even though I have platinum tier strength now, the immortal elven army will exhaust me to my death. It looks like you have an idea. Fox seemed tense. He could not come up with a solid strategy for dealing with the immortal elves. After all, the Holy Dragon Kingdom had successfully conquered that land in the past by depending on Antonio, an immortal. Plus, they had so many elves in their army. Unless, of course, the fortress city's army was blessed with the potential to remain immortal. When he fought the elves, he saw how the sea folks around Watson were resurrected after they were killed. They shared the same traits as the elves. Perhaps those sea folk creatures' immortality had something to do with Watson. The simplest method to stop the elves is to avoid fighting them. So, I intend to strengthen the defenses. There will be no way to break in if the fortress city becomes an unbreakable fortress, even if the elves could not die. I summoned you, Lord Fox, because I want you to keep the residents from being too astonished when I modify the stronghold. You have the ability to calm people down. Watson's statements did not live up to Fox's expectations. He appeared to be dissatisfied. That's your thought? Do not worry, Your Majesty. Do whatever you want. I will notify the city's people. He hoped Watson would provide them the capacity to become immortal and allow them to fight the elves. He did not expect Watson to only fortify the fortress city. He did not believe that the fortress city would be able to survive more elven attacks after it had been upgraded. Furthermore, fortifying a city would necessitate many people and material resources. It would be preferable to teach them the power of resurrection. Fox, despite his disappointment, did not dare to express it. Watson had already done a lot for the fortress city, so he could not have high expectations. It is reassuring to hear that. Watson's smile widened as Fox realized what he was thinking. He turned around and reached out toward the metropolis ahead of him. Fusion system, activate. The entire castle city rocked. The ground shook within a 10-kilometer radius, transforming into streams of light that converged in the direction of the fortress city. The fortress city, which was covered in trash, had created numerous tall palaces quickly. However, that was not the end of it. The walls outside the palaces increased as well, from tens of meters to hundreds of meters in height. The height had increased tenfold from before. The front piece converged in the air, forming a massive dome that encircled the city. The fortress city had turned into a real fortress. The dome was translucent, and it glistened like diamonds. It elicited a frenzy of exclamations throughout the city the moment it appeared. What happened? Why is there a wall in the sky? Chapter 542, The 9-Layer Star Dome Enchantment. What's going on? Fox looked blankly up at the glistening dome that had risen above his head. The dome was made of high-quality materials. It appeared to be incredibly hard, but it did not affect the sunlight. Magic runes that flowed unexpectedly appeared and disappeared on the dome's translucent substance. He had expected Watson's strengthening of the fortress city to make the city's defenses stronger than before, but he had not expected the city to shift so dramatically. The fortress city was suddenly brimming with magnificent palaces. Dense energy particles congregated to produce a bright energy tide. On the ground, there were a few specks of cloud. The city on the ground appeared to be a floating divine kingdom, but what surprised him the most was that Watson had accomplished that feat with merely a wave of his hand. He felt as if he were dreaming. Congratulations, Master, for successfully fusing the fortress city with the nearby surface. You have obtained a Starlight Tier Planetary Fortress. Starlight Tier Building, Planetary Fortress. Abilities, Star Dome Enchantment. The fortress contains the energy of an entire planet. It can absorb the light of the stars and release a protective shield to resist attacks at the starlight tier. Casting star cannons, the offensive weapon of the Planetary Fortress, can shoot out destructive light beams containing the power of the stars. Additional abilities: Star Rotation. The Planetary Fortress rotates all the time and can reverse the gravity around the fortress. Star Revolution. The Planetary Fortress revolves around the capital of the Holy Dragon Kingdom, leaving behind a layer of Star Dome enchantment wherever it passes. Once the enchantment is destroyed, it will absorb starlight to recover. After Watson performed the fusion system, the sound of a system notification rang in his ears. Lord Fox, I am going to put the newly upgraded Planetary Fortress to the test. Could you please explain it to the residents? Watson turned into a streak of light and flew into the air, leaving Fox looking as if he was about to cry. He stood there stomping his feet, mumbling, "What is going on?" Watson requested that he explain the situation. He had no idea how he was going to do that. Watson converted the fortress city into that with a flick of his finger, he told the residents. The fortress city is now known as the Planetary Fortress. Could everyone agree on that? However, he still did not grasp the power that Watson's so-called Planetary Fortress possessed. Ignoring Fox's reaction, Watson was already standing high in the sky. The Planetary Fortress was a huge star structure that was emitting starlight. It also had a layer of starlight barrier. It reached up to the sky and had no end. It was rooted to the ground below. The barrier was surrounded by a high-density cyclone that only existed in outer space. Flashes of lightning also protected the building. The rumbling sound that came from the movement was very frightening. Initially, the fortress city covered a 10-kilometer radius. Its area had grown to more than 100 kilometers after Watson's modification. The fortress was slowly moving from west to east, and the starlight barrier on the ground was constantly extending. The fortress city had moved almost 100 kilometers in just a few minutes, leaving behind a 100-kilometer-long starlight barrier. The teleportation array's light appeared beneath Watson's feet. His body fluttered in midair indefinitely, keeping up with the speed of the planetary stronghold. The Holy Dragon Kingdom's land was shaped like an uneven ellipse. The borders to the north and south were incredibly long. As the planetary fortress moved, a hemispherical barrier appeared, with the capital in the center, progressively enclosing the area of the Holy Dragon Kingdom. F.A.T.C.A.T.S City was located in one of the few border cities not far from the planetary fortress. "Look, Mommy! Meteors have fallen to the ground." A small child waited at the city entrance, clutching his mother's hand. His eyes shone as he raised his head and pointed outside the city. "Oh, meteors are in the sky. Why would meteors be on the ground?" The boy's mother patted his head with a look of astonishment on her face and a reproachful tone. "I am not making this up. There are meteors on the ground." The youngster insisted, leading his mother to look up. She was astonished when she saw it. She noticed a massive star surrounded by a tornado at the city's side. It brought with it a smothering sense of tyranny from all directions. It flew quickly beyond the city's outskirts, causing a layer of starlight barrier to develop as far as the eye could see, shutting out the sunshine. It was not just the surrounding cities. Following the movement of the planetary fortress, an increasing number of people witnessed the meteor and the massive light barrier that appeared at the border. Many people rubbed their eyes subconsciously, they thought they were dreaming. Across the border. Rumble. Did you see it? It appears that a meteor has just flown out of Mount Creation. A farmer's work was interrupted by a loud bang. He rested his hoe on his shoulder and cast a narrowed gaze towards the distance. It appears to be a meteor. It is the first time I have seen a meteor on the ground. I believe young Master Watson was standing on the meteor. I am not sure whether I saw it correctly. Another farmer extended his angel wings and took flight. He grumbled to himself as he placed his palm on his brow. Only young Master Watson is capable of creating a flying star on the ground. Look, a protective shield has formed on the ground where the flying star moved. It appears to be quite powerful. Even diamond tier strikes could not penetrate such a formidable protective shell, right? Is young Master Watson constructing a safety net to safeguard the kingdom? More Mount Creation residents took to the skies. Their eyesight was excellent for platinum tier elites. They saw the meteor fly by, and a tall wall formed of starlight had emerged outside of Mount Creation, where the Dragonspine Snow Mountain had collapsed. The Holy Dragon Kingdom's rotation will take around a day, based on the pace of the Planetary Fortress. A day is far too long. Please allow me to expedite this. Watson murmured to himself as he stood over the Planetary Fortress. He stretched his right hand toward the Planetary Fortress as he spoke, and a gleaming compass materialized in his hand. The Limitless Compass was one of the 3 peak Starlight tier artifacts he had previously made. The Limitless Compass could manipulate space. Watson infinitely compressed the entire space where the Holy Dragon Kingdom was located at that time, forcing the Planetary Fortress to go around the Holy Dragon Kingdom once in just a few seconds. The Holy Dragon Kingdom could be seen clearly from the sky. A clear outline formed on the border's line as if a god was sketching a circle with a brush on the map of the continent. That was not the end of the story. After constructing the Planetary Fortress, Watson waved his hand and called the Book of Wisdom. He invited ancient cities to descend and combine with those cities through the Book of Wisdom. He built the other 8 planetary fortresses in the same manner. On the outskirts of the Holy Dragon Kingdom, 9 planetary fortresses rose, establishing 9 invincible starlight walls. Each of them revolved at a distinct rate around the kingdom's core. Watson nodded in approval after he finished those. With 9 planetary fortresses and the Starlight Barrier, the Holy Dragon Kingdom's defense will be invincible from now on. Previously, the most impressive thing he had accomplished with the fusion system was to fuse the whole boundary. He had overcome that and united the entire outer region of the Holy Dragon Kingdom. It was an incredible miracle. Chapter 543, Worshipping Him as a God. There were 9 planetary fortresses. That structure was inspired by the 9 walls surrounding the Holy Dragon Kingdom's capital. The Holy Dragon Kingdom's capital had never been attacked by natural calamities or conflicts because of those walls. Compared to the planetary fortresses Watson was constructing, the so-called high walls were nothing. It would be impossible to breach the defenses of those 9 planetary fortresses without Starlight tier attacks. It's like I have imprisoned the Holy Dragon Kingdom. Those on the outside can't enter it, and those on the inside can't leave without my permission. Watson put the Book of Wisdom and the Limitless Compass away, enjoying his work. He had always hoped to use the system to merge the entire Holy Dragon Kingdom. There were no restrictions in the past due to the massive mountain. The unification of the planetary fortresses is just the first stage. The Holy Dragon Kingdom's territory will be merged after this. But I can't do it too quickly. I must expose some information to the kingdom's residents for them to be able to adapt to the kingdom's circumstances. Watson considered ways to integrate and modify the kingdom. He had always wished for his family and friends to have a good life. It was a fantastic idea to begin by altering the environment where everyone lived. He had already built the Mount Creation, the Dragon Star, and the Dragon Palace. Then, he built the planetary fortresses. What would the Holy Dragon Kingdom look like if he combined all of those Starlight tier buildings? He was excited about it. During his thought, a group of people commanded by F.A.T.C.A.T.S extended their fighting aura wings or used wind element magic to soar in the planetary fortress, which had been fused from the fortress city. Everyone in the room was taken aback by the 9 planetary fortresses and the 9 vast planetary belts that surrounded them. This is incredible. I can't believe how decrepit the fortress city has become. By the way, can it still be called a city when it has deteriorated to that extent? It is not just the fortress city. His Highness has also built 8 identical cities as well as a massive light shield. Those light shields are invisible and cover an unknown area. That is the defensive system His Highness devised to combat the elves. I am curious how it works. You should be extremely familiar with that, Lord Fox. Please tell us about it. How did those massive starlight barriers appear, Lord Fox? And how did His Highness design those planet-like cities? They can move on their own. Please tell us. They all turned their gazes to Fox while they were exclaiming in surprise. Fox had just informed them that Watson intended to remodel the fortress cities to strengthen their defensive capabilities to avoid being breached by the elves. He had also advised them not to be alarmed. They were mentally prepared for it, but when they saw what Watson had made, they could not help but be surprised. Even the exquisite mansions inside were enough to take them by surprise. They had never heard of or seen such a city before. They would not even dare to live in it if they did not ask. Don't ask me, I'm not sure either. His Highness just mentioned the city names to me. You can ask His Highness about the purpose of the Planetary Fortress and how it was built. Fox's expression was sour. All folks came up to him and asked him how he knew Watson did it. His heart was filled with astonishment and doubt as well. Watson had just stated that he intended to devise a defensive strategy to prevent the elves from attacking. He assumed Watson would not be able to complete the task. Reality had slapped him on the face. The elves would not be able to break through the massive starlight barrier, let alone the planetary fortresses. It was not only the elves, no one in that world would be able to breach such a fortress. Everyone, pay attention to me. All the planetary fortresses have a starlight tier defense. In other words, as long as one is not a god, there is no way to overcome its defenses. Those planetary fortresses should be numbered from 1 to 9. The planetary castles you all will dwell in are the number 1 planetary fortress, buried deep within the planet. You have the option of living there in peace. Watson cleared his voice and utilized his combat aura to widen the sound as he heard conversations from all directions. Aside from the number 1 planetary fortress, Watson had no intention of allowing anyone to dwell in the remaining 8 planetary fortresses. Perhaps he would deploy some soldiers to function as monitors, keeping an eye out for intruders. That would assure the Holy Dragon Kingdom's safety. They can endure the gods' attacks. Is that right? After hearing Watson's words, one official displayed an expression of astonishment. The gods had ruled over humans in that realm. The gods were almighty in the eyes of the common people, and the fortresses could even survive the gods' attacks. It was difficult for them to envision what form of attack could breach those defenses. The Golden River can assist us in our quest for achieving Gold Tier. We can even get a power that exceeds our current level if we believe in him. It does not seem impossible for those defensive barriers to survive God's attacks, someone else said. They might not have believed it if it had been spoken by someone else in front of them, but it was Watson who had said it. His influence in the fortress city has already surpassed human strength in the last 2 days. He could, after all, raise the dead. Many people in the fortress city believed Watson was a reincarnation of a god, which was why he possessed such extraordinary abilities. How could they not believe the words of a reincarnated god? Thank you very much, Your Highness. You've assisted us in repelling the elven army and increasing our strength. You have built a formidable defense for the fortress city. We are at a loss for words to express our gratitude. While many people were astonished, they enthusiastically conveyed their gratitude to Watson. Everyone, do not stand on ceremony. Building those 9 planetary fortresses is just the beginning of my efforts to improve the fortress city. It is not enough to simply have a strong defense. To be safe, I must assist everyone in increasing their strength. Even if the elves manage to breach the barrier, they will not be a threat to you. Let us get started right away before the elves attack. Watson smiled as he looked at the crowd. Will our strength continue to grow? After hearing Watson's statements, everyone in the room was taken aback. Many of them had been regular folks just a day before, but they had gained platinum tier strength in just 1 day. Watson's powers did not appear to be limited to that. Of course, your existing abilities are insufficient in the face of a true elite. I can make you tens of times stronger than you are today. The only requirement is that you work with me. Rest assured, Your Highness, that we shall be here for you. Whatever you do, we will undoubtedly cooperate. We shall do whatever you want us to do from now on. Many people from the original fortress city exchanged glances. Everyone knelt in front of Watson. Many of them used to regard Watson as a hero. Then, they regarded him as a god. Chapter 544, The God of Death's Descendants. We will soon be able to pass through the primitive forest and arrive at the fortress city. Everyone, please rest. A team of over 100 elves passed through the dense primitive forest. Even though each of them did not exude a powerful aura, the aura of a high-tier life form still made the nearby magical beasts retreat 3 meters away. Some magical beasts that could not dodge in time even crawled on the ground, whimpering and shivering. The person who spoke was a female elf leading the elven troops. That female elf had short emerald green hair and wore black tights, exposing her thighs and smooth lower abdomen. She looked very sexy. She also wore a black mask on her face, only revealing a pair of beautiful star-shaped eyes. Her thin eyebrows were like 2 willow leaves. That female elf was the leader of the assassination team sent by the Elven King to capture Watson. Her name was Delta, and she was initially a member of the Elven assassination team under Elder Daphne's command. Every member of the Elven assassination team was trained as an assassin from birth. They did not have real names, only code names. Delta was a code name, symbolizing that she occupied the 4th seat in the assassination team. The 3 assassins above her position were Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. At that moment, she was accompanied by Beta. They were different from the 100 elven assassins that King Jersey had temporarily assembled as professional assassins. They were more professional. I'm so tired. After traveling for a day, I can finally rest. A burly man with short white hair and a longbow on his back sat down with his arms flapping. His body was different from the other elves' gorgeous clothes made of leaves. He wore a simple linen robe. His exposed skin was covered in knife wounds and sword scars. Is there anyone willing to go hunting and get us some food? After sitting on the ground, the burly man looked around. Sensing his gaze, the other elves' pupils contracted, and they subconsciously took a few steps backward. It was obvious that they were afraid of that burly man. Beta, if you want to eat, go find it yourself. We are not your slaves, Delta frowned and berated him in dissatisfaction. The seemingly carefree, white-haired elf was the second in command of the assassination team Beta. In the battle at the fortress city the previous day, Beta had single-handedly killed more than 200 humans. His greatest contribution that day was taking down the fortress city. Delta, why are you talking to me like that? Are you provoking me? His Majesty sent you and me to that battle. I'm already very displeased about that. I am enough to capture a human youth. Sending so many useless people will only slow me down. You guys can only be useful in capturing animals and cooking. If you can't even do that, I really don't know why I have to bring you guys along. Beta reached out to pick her ears, revealing a mouth full of sharp teeth. Her seemingly casual words contained strong killing intent. Beta, what do you mean? You're indeed very strong. We may not be your match, but we've also become powerful after our race chess piece improved. Don't underestimate us. Without waiting for Delta to speak, a male elf in the crowd had spoken up in anger. As he spoke, the male elf looked carefully at Delta. When he realized that Delta was expressionless and did not look at him, a hint of disappointment appeared on his face. Even though Delta was an assassin, her beautiful appearance and excellent figure brought her many admirers in the elven race. That male elf was one of them. The veil on Delta's face was not to hide her facial features to avoid being recognized. It hid her beauty and prevented her from receiving too much attention. Leaving Delta aside, that male elf had stood up against Beta because he had transformed under the power of the race chess pieces. He was only a weak silver tier elf in the past, but he had transformed into a platinum tier mythical creature. He was an elite, no matter how one thought about it. I remember that you were one of the first people to be given energy by His Majesty using the race's chess pieces. The one who awakened seems to be the blood demon race. Beta turned around and sneered, "You're complacent and think that you're an amazing elite just because the power was given to you. Because of that mindset, I say that you guys can't do it. The so-called strength would be meaningless if they were not earned through countless trials and tribulations. I can kill a guy like you with just a flick of my finger. Would you believe me if I said that? I don't believe you." Feeling the coldness in Beta's eyes, the male elf's body trembled, and then he puffed out his chest. Whoosh! A soundless wind blew past, and a crack suddenly appeared on the male elf's body. The crack rotated around his neck. Then, his head broke off from his neck with a click and fell to the ground. The surrounding elves looked terrified because they did not even see how Beta attacked the male elf before he died. The male elf's head still looked the same as before, it was as if he did not even feel that he was injured. Overconfidence. That is the symbol of an idiot. Retracting his finger, Beta continued to pick his ears. The male elf who had his head cut off had reacted, and scarlet blood appeared on the surface of his head and body. The blood then turned into hard steel. The connection in the air seemed to reforge his body. However, that process only lasted for half of the scarlet blood before a layer of black mist appeared on the surface. Under the effect of the black mist, the blood's condensation finally stopped, but the blood had lost its vitality. It collapsed to the ground, and the terrified voice of the male elf came from within it. "Why can't my body regenerate? I have the bloodline of the mythical creature, blood demon. Even if my body is hacked into pieces, I can be resurrected with just a piece of tissue remaining. But why?" The screams stopped abruptly. The blood demon elf's body had turned entirely rotten from blood water that seeped into the soil and disappeared. Beta had killed one of us. His Majesty had also given him the power from the chess piece set. What race did he evolve from? How did he kill the blood demon race that claimed to be immortal? Let's not talk about that. We have drunk from the spring of life to gain eternal life. Why didn't the other elves resurrect? The elves looked at the blood on the ground, their expressions becoming even more gloomy. Beta, you dare to use the power of death on your companion? Under its effect, your opponent will not be protected. They might even welcome true death. Before capturing Watson, you had already lost a companion for no reason at all. What are you trying to do? Delta could not stand it any longer, she snorted coldly. I just told him that I could kill him. He did not believe that he had chosen to give his life to me. What can I do? Such a foolish fellow would not be able to do anything even if he was alive. Instead, he might be a burden. What I am doing is meaningful. Delta, I advise you to keep your mouth shut. Otherwise, I don't mind sending you to eternal sleep as well. Beta stretched his hand from his ear and flicked it. He revealed his mouth full of sharp teeth at Delta, as if he would attack Delta if she said something wrong. You, forget it. Delta's expression darkened. Her lips moved as she wanted to say something, but in the end, she chose to hold it in. As the leader of the assassination team, she and Beta were also given the power of a race chess piece. Since they had their own powerful strength, she and Beta had evolved into mythical creatures that were different from the others. They were already peak diamond tier elites. Beta was evolved from an ancient god, the god of death. It was a race born from the god of death's blood. It possessed the ability to bestow death to the people. However, she evolved her mythical creature Phoenix and Beta's abilities were too weak, it was not a good fight. Chapter 545, Where did the fortress city go? How annoying! Why does my partner have to be that homicidal maniac Beta? Half an hour had passed since Beta killed one of her companions. During that half an hour, all the elves still rested at that spot. Some hunted a few animals and mixed them with plants before cooking them. No one dared to criticize Beta's actions. Delta sat on a protruding rock a little further away. She put a sour wild fruit into her mouth and sighed unhappily. As the only woman in the assassination unit, Elder Daphne treated her very well. Some of the assassins who ranked lower in the team also adored her. That led to a good childhood for her. There were often male elves who gave her gifts, but she was not satisfied with them. Instead, she envied those ordinary elven girls. Elder Daphne gave me a dagger on my 18th birthday. Those men who adored me gave me gifts that were either concealed weapons or sharp arrows made by craftsmen. The last time I opened the gift, I accidentally cut my hand. Those guys are indeed assassins. They don't understand the thoughts of young girls at all. Their gifts can't make people happy. She sighed. The more she thought about it, the more upset she felt. If she had not been chosen to be a member of the assassination team when she was young, she would have been able to accept flowers, cakes, and other exquisite gifts just like an ordinary girl. She would not have been reduced to carrying out an assassination together with Beta, watching Beta kill a teammate without being able to stop it. Delta's dream in that life was very simple. It was to be a simple girl, marry a person she liked, and have many sons. Lady Delta, mealtime is over. Should we set off? Her fantasy was interrupted. She raised her head and realized that a male elf had appeared in front of her. He was clearly asking her a question, but his gaze could not help but drift in the direction of Beta. At that moment, Beta was holding a bone that still had meat on it. He was complaining as he ate. This meat tastes too ordinary. Even though it's an assassination mission, why didn't anyone bring seasoning with them? Speaking of which, haven't any of us evolved into a race that has something to do with seasonings? For example, we can extract sea salt from our bodies, or our blood can be converted into seasonings. It makes me feel bad when I eat such disgusting food. Even the cooking is so casual. Shouldn't such a person die to atone for his sins? How could there be such a race? They even wanted to kill the cook just because they hated food. It was too cruel. Delta was speechless. She wanted to retort, but after some thought, she held back. Go tell the others that we will set off immediately. After consoling the elf in front of her, Delta knew that the reason the elf came to find her was that he was afraid that Beta would not be satisfied with the food and be angry. Beta, it's time for us to leave. If you really want to eat delicious food, it's not too late to wait until we reach the fortress city. It's said that many people there are proficient in cooking. Many of the cuisines are things that we have never seen before. After consoling her subordinates, Delta quickly came to Beta's side. Delta, that makes sense. When I attacked the fortress city, I was so focused on killing people that I forgot to spare one or two humans. Even though humans are weak, they are good at inventing. Furthermore, human girls are also very good looking. This time, I will pay more attention. Before I kill them, I will choose some to be my slaves. I believe that His Majesty will not blame me if he knows about that. Beta smiled and put the boar bone he had almost chewed into his mouth as his sharp teeth chewed it. It made a creaking sound as it was chewed into pieces and swallowed into his stomach. Beta was very relaxed. It seemed like it would only take a minute for him to break through the fortress city and catch Watson. After all, he had already attacked the fortress city once before, and Delta was also convinced of that. Although Beta had a brutal personality and often attacked his companions, which gave the elven elders a headache, Beta's ability was enough to make up for that. Landon was widely recognized as the strongest elven elite, and Beta could not compare to Landon in terms of strength. However, in terms of assassination, Beta could kill elites that Landon could not. The so-called assassination was to defeat the strong with the weak. It was completely different from a head-on confrontation. Poison, threats, hidden weapons, and all kinds of despicable methods could be used. I've already thought of ways to deal with Watson. When I see him, I can kill him in 12 ways, but I won't let him die so easily. With an unbridled smile, Beta's eyes glowed red. Beta, didn't His Majesty say that he wanted to keep Watson alive? Why are you killing him? Delta suppressed the discomfort in her heart. Killing the target of the mission is my creed. His Majesty might have said that he wanted to keep Watson alive, but I don't intend to abide by it. Delta, are you going to stop me? Delta simply shook her head and complained in her heart. She would not stop him, and there would not be any benefits. If she could kill Watson, it would be considered completing the mission. Even if His Majesty pursued that issue, she could also shift the responsibility to Beta. It's useless to say much now. Let's enter the fortress city first. Won't it be very easy to enter the fortress city? We had already breached it yesterday, and His Majesty's marionette poison had poisoned almost everyone. Now, the city should be filled with whales, and the defenses should be lax. We can sneak in easily. Beta shook his head with a disdainful expression. According to his speculation, no other elves would be able to stop him if he were to enter the fortress city alone. He could capture Watson, but he might also be able to occupy the entire city. If he could do that, His Majesty would also reward him. With that thought in mind, he was just about to get up and head toward the fortress city when the scouts returned. They shouted with a terrified expression. Something bad has happened. The fortress city is gone. Gone? Is that true? How can a city disappear into thin air? Did someone use a disguise spell to hide it? Take a better look. The elves looked at each other in disbelief. The scout still had a panicked expression on his face. I'm not lying to you. The fortress city is gone. If you don't believe me, go and see for yourself. Not only is the fortress city gone, but a layer of starlight has also appeared where the fortress city used to be. I don't know if it's a defensive measure set up by the people there. No matter how we attack, we can't break it. Useless. You can't even break a layer of protective barrier, and you're already back with your tail between your legs. Beta heard that and came in front of the scout with a whoosh. He raised his hand to grab the scout's neck and questioned him coldly. When the scout's face was red, and he had difficulty breathing, Beta released his hand and threw him on the ground. If you can't break the protective barrier, then you can just die there. You'll likely bring your pursuers and expose our location if you come back. Or what if their higher UPS sense our intention to attack and secretly escape? Fortunately, I did not sense the aura of any pursuers. It seems like the residents of the human city have no intention of pursuing us. It depends on whether they want to escape or not. I'm sorry, Lord Beta. I was wrong. Please punish me. The scout lay on the ground, his face red from being reprimanded. He rubbed his neck and spoke with difficulty. I don't have the time to listen to your apology now. We'll talk about it after we break through the fortress city. After giving the scout a stern look, Beta turned around, and a ball of black mist appeared on his body. The mist formed 6 wings that carried him into the air and turned into a streak of black light that shot toward the fortress city. The other elves, led by Delta, followed suit. The primitive forest that the elves had set up camp was not far from the fortress city. They only had to fly for a few minutes before they arrived in front of the fortress city. To be precise, they had arrived at the original fortress city because the fortress city had already disappeared. An endless transparent starlight barrier was in front of them. What is that? Where did the fortress city go? The elves looked at the scene in front of them with shock. When the scouts came back to talk about the situation in the fortress city, they were not as irritable as Beta, but they also thought that that elf was a good-for-nothing. That was until they saw the scene in front of them. Many of them were even worse than the scouts. Chapter 546, The 9 Layers of Barrier. Is that light barrier formed by some kind of magic? It's hard to imagine what kind of magic could release such a huge light barrier. I've never heard of it before. An elf stared blankly at the protective light barrier in front of him. He subconsciously stretched out his right hand. His right hand immediately transformed into a sharp machete from flesh and blood. The machete grew in the air and became 40 meters long. It was several meters wide, and it landed heavily on the light shield. Bang! With a muffled sound, a few cracks appeared on the 40-meter-long machete that the elf's right hand had transformed into. Meanwhile, the starlight barrier did not move at all. It did not even shake once. That powerful defensive power shocked the elves present. After the elf who had attacked the starlight barrier was upgraded by their race chess piece, they obtained the bloodline of a mythical creature called the Sea Giant Ape. They possessed the ability to transform their limbs into a weapon comparable to a platinum tier weapon. At the same time, the weapon touched by it would be enchanted, becoming even more powerful than an ordinary platinum tier weapon. A platinum tier weapon could not shatter the light barrier, which meant that the spell was very likely to be diamond tier. In addition, the range of that spell could not be seen, and it was connected to the ground from the sky to the ground. No one knew how much area it covered, but it had a range of several hundred kilometers, at least. It was hard to imagine what kind of person could cast a diamond tier spell covering a few hundred kilometers. Even Antonio, who had lived for more than 400 years and was known as the greatest mage in the Holy Dragon Kingdom, could cast even 1/10 of that spell. The power in his body would be exhausted. What are you standing there for? Get out of my way. A mere layer of magic shield has already stumped all of you. You're really useless. Beta grinned. His arrogant words made it impossible for the elves to refute him. They made way for him. Pushing the few elves beside him, Beta came to the front of the enormous light barrier. Stretching his shoulders, he extended his right hand. A barrier of this level, I can probably break it with one hand. A thick black fog emerged from Beta's right hand as he spoke. He held it in his palm and gradually formed a solid black sphere. He ruthlessly threw it in the direction of the light barrier. Diamond tier fighting technique, Death Hole. The entire black sphere was formed from the aura of death that he had mastered. The Death Hole was to compress the aura of the dead to the extreme and then explode. Faced with such a powerful aura of death, anyone below platinum tier would instantly melt into undead creatures or skeletons. Even if the shield in front of him were a diamond tier shield, it would still be corroded by the aura of death that cracked the wall. The Death Hole soon collided with the starlight barrier. The black death aura appeared on the surface of the barrier like spots and began to permeate into it, leaving a layer of corrosion marks on it. The corroded areas were expanding. Beta could not help but smile proudly. I told you that starlight barrier was easy to break. He was suddenly stunned halfway through his sentence. The other elves present were also startled because they saw the protective barrier that Beta had corroded with death magic had healed quickly. The black spots had also disappeared as if they had never appeared before. Beta failed. One of the elves could not help but exclaim. His ability originated from the descendants of the god of death. He could kill us after we drank the water from the spring of life. Why can't he break through that protective barrier? Even though he could counter the effects of water from the spring of life, he could not break through the protective barrier. Did that mean the attributes of the protective barrier in front of him were even stronger than water from the spring of life? The water from the spring of life was a supreme treasure passed down by the elven race since ancient times. Only Beta, who had mastered the power of death, could counter its effects. That was because Beta's ability originated from a god. Was the power in the light barrier also at the level of a god? How was that possible? A mere barrier can withstand my attack? It seems like I have underestimated my opponent. However, I did not use my full strength just now. That attack was only 10% of my strength. Next, I will use all of my strength. After explaining, Beta's expression became serious as he looked at the defensive barrier in front of him. Peak Diamond Tier Fighting Technique, 100-Layered Death Ray. He pressed his palms together and extended his arms. Light erupted from the hands in front of him. Countless black lights flew out and turned into straight black arrows that fell toward the starlight barrier. The black arrows made a clear sound as they landed on the barrier. They began to pollute the barrier into black color. However, that process lasted slightly longer than before. The same thing happened during Beta's last attack. The starlight barrier repelled the arrows, but it was unharmed. Peak Diamond Tier Fighting Technique, Death Scythe. Peak Diamond Tier Fighting Technique, playing the death knell. After releasing several different fighting techniques in succession, a pitch-black cloak appeared on Beta's body, and a huge pitch-black scythe appeared in his hand. A crack appeared in the air in front of him with just a light slash, or a huge death knell appeared beside him. The death knell let out a loud bang, and rolling black fog spread in all directions along with the sound waves. It was mixed with the roars of countless ghosts. The other elves' faces were pale. However, regardless of whether it was Death's Sickle or other Diamond Tier battle techniques, none of them had any reaction after bombarding the starlight barrier. At first, the other elves were still surprised by Beta's powerful strength, as elves who had also obtained the power of the race chess pieces had strength similar to a platinum tier mythical creature. However, Beta's strength was at peak Diamond Tier, and he even grasped the power of a god. It was completely different from their level. It was precisely because the difference in strength was so significant that they could only endure it even if Beta showed off in front of them. However, it seemed like Beta's strength was also like that. Beta was unable to open the barrier with all his strength. At most, a few cracks would appear on the outer shell of the barrier. If they worked hard, it seemed like they would be able to do it as well. Beta is not as powerful as he claims. Many elves whispered. Even though their voices were soft, they still reached Beta's ears. Those words stung his self-esteem. He wanted to be strong. His usual pride was only on the surface. The real him liked to stand above tens of thousands of people and admire the looks of respect and fear of others. However, that was Beta in the assassination team. There was an even stronger alpha above him, making him very unhappy. He was the leader of the assassination team at that moment, and it was his own request to capture Watson. If he could complete the mission successfully, he would be promoted by His Majesty due to his outstanding contributions. He might be able to upgrade from his position as Beta to Alpha. He was about to succeed, so how could he give up because of a small barrier? The bloodline of the God of Death has been fully activated. Descend, ancient creatures that were once buried under the earth. Beta shouted. His eyes had turned pure black, while his pupils turned red. Then, the muscles on his body were covered by the black fog and expanded. He went from being about 2 meters tall to almost 5 meters tall in a short time. Bone spikes pierced through the clothes on his body, turning into heavy armor with a mask. There were also barbs growing on the back of the bone armor, and a sickle-shaped tail swayed behind him. In just a few seconds, Beta had revealed his true appearance as a descendant of the God of Death. The earth began to shake as he transformed, and several skeleton arms stretched from the ground. Pale and sharp fingernails tore through the ground, leaving deep ravines. Those skeletal hands that had been flipped out were densely packed. Looking down from above, the entire ground was covered in skeletons. Some of the skeletons had torn clothes hanging from their bodies, and they had rusty iron swords and shields in their hands. There were also some skeletons with powerful auras. They seemed to have been strong when they were alive. Those skeletons were not only humans but also of other races. The deeper they went into the ground, the bigger and more powerful the skeletons became. At first, the skeletons were only as strong as Iron Tier elites, but later, those with Silver and Gold Tier strength had appeared. There were even a few dragon bones that were more than 100 meters in size, and they gave off a Platinum Tier aura. From its birth, that land had experienced countless years. There were already 12 eras after the mythological era. During those 12 eras, countless dead had been buried in that land for more than 10,000 years. At that moment, those undead were all summoned by Beta with the power of death. Countless powerful skeletons quickly filled the interior of the light barrier. The swords in their hands or the white bone claws clawed fiercely into the barrier. They forcefully tore a crack on the starlight barrier that even Diamond Tier elites could not break. That barrier seems to be indestructible, right? Didn't I still manage to open it? Beta, who had transformed into a monster, let out an ear-piercing laugh that reverberated within the bone armor. After laughing for a few seconds, he suddenly realized that something was wrong because the elves around him did not cheer. Instead, they had strange expressions on their faces, their gazes landed on the torn barrier. Subconsciously, he looked over and discovered another layer of starlight barrier within the barrier that he had torn apart. Furthermore, through the starlight barrier, he could vaguely see several similar layers within. That nearly made him nearly vomit blood. How could that be? He had used almost all his strength to summon the bones of an ancient elite to break through the barrier. Who would have thought that that barrier was only the first layer? It was not supposed to play out like that. Chapter 547, Hit by the City. That is already the 9th barrier that is about to be broken. I really hope that that barrier is the last one. An elf rubbed his sore shoulder and sat on a huge protruding rock on the ground, sighing. There were many other elves beside him. They all looked tired as they looked at the starlight barrier that spanned across heaven and earth and covered an unknown number of kilometers in front of them. Their expressions were gloomy. They had received the king's order to form an assassination team to head to the fortress city. They thought the mission would be straightforward. Even if the Holy Dragon Kingdom's monarch guarded the fortress city, each of them had risen to the level of mythical creatures. How could the fortress city even have the strength to deal with over 100 powerful platinum-tier existences? However, most of the contempt in their hearts for the fortress city had disappeared. It had been half a day since they set off, and still, they had yet to break through the other 8 barriers. They had not even seen the fortress city's silhouette, let alone capturing Watson. That was still the result of relying on Beta. If he had not done all he could to summon a large number of skeletons of the dead, including the remains of some ancient gods, they would not even be able to break through the first protective barrier. As for the price, Beta's face had turned black, and his lips were pale. He could no longer maintain his complete form as the god of death's descendant. His legs swayed as he sat there. Many elves looked at Beta with pity in their eyes. That ruthless fellow who would kill his companions without any hesitation had become so silent. It was all the fault of those starlight barriers. None of them could break it if they had not reached the starlight tier. If those enchantments were not broken in one go, they would automatically repair themselves. It was a torturous process. Have you rested? Get up and continue to work. Beta seemed to feel the gazes of the elves. He frowned and looked unhappy. Suddenly, he stood up from where he was sitting. He was at the fortress city to capture Watson so that he could show off in front of the Elven King and let him know how outstanding he was. If that dragged on, his goal would not be fulfilled. Wake up, God of Death, who had existed since ancient times and had fallen into a deep sleep. Extending his hands, Beta shouted toward the sky, I am willing to pay with my blood in exchange for your powerful strength. His left hand's fingernails cut at his right wrist, and blood ran down the direction of his wrist. The blood covered the ground, leaving no trace of color because the blood was absorbed the minute it touched it. The ground that had absorbed the blood seemed to spring to life, erupting in a terrifying roar. Numerous massive skeletons stood up and stretched their arms from the earth, delving into the soil. There were skeletons with 2 horns on their heads, limbs more than 10 meters long, and giants dozens of meters tall among them. They might collapse the earth with a single step. An enormous dragon with ghost flames burning on its opened wings flew across the sky, as did 3 heads with rotten flesh sprouting in their chests. Those skeletons were not the most powerful. There were a few terribly mutilated skeletons among the resurrected skeletons. They were either missing their heads or had holes all over their bodies. Those mutilated bones were engulfed in golden light and had a magnificent aura. A few false divine kingdom projections floated above their heads. Those skeletons with the ability to conjure divine kingdoms were the gods who had perished in that country in ancient times. They had successfully revived at that point, thanks to Beta's summoning, and had begun to attack the protective barrier in front of them. Divine Kingdom of Light. Divine Kingdom of Mountain. Divine Kingdom of Fire. There were the remains of more than 10 resurrected gods, with the 3 prominent ones being relatively well preserved. Among them, the god who unleashed the divine kingdom of light was a creature with a triangular cone-shaped body that resembled a prism. The last 2 gods were also not humans. The first was a turtle with 8 legs and a massive mountain on its back, while the second was a female with flaming hair. Every hair on her body was a raging inferno. The other 3 gods' remains were attacked at the same time. 3 separate divine kingdoms intertwined. On the massive mountain, light and flames exploded, and gravel flew everywhere. Each of those boulders had a greater impact force than a cannonball, and as they flew through the air, they collided and erupted again, generating a chain of explosions that ripped a hole in the starlight barrier. I am hoping that the time barrier is the last one. Beta prayed silently in his heart. He floated up behind the cover of the many skeleton troops and soared toward the torn hole in the air, a concerned expression on his face. The elves trailing behind him did the same. The elves quickly soared past the barrier and peered ahead. "There's no more. There is no starlight barrier ahead," someone yelled. Everyone's expressions brightened. They possessed great strength, but they were unable to employ it due to the barrier's hindrance. It was time to reap the lives of the humans in the fortress city now that they had finally entered. They desired retaliation for the annoyance they felt when they were trapped beyond the barrier. The barrier is gone, but what about the fortress city? Many elves breathed a sigh of relief as they saw that the barrier in front of them had vanished. They were at ease, but they quickly sensed that something was wrong. The 9 walls in front of them were gone, but so was the fortress city. Not only did they erect so many barricades, but they also caused the fortress city to vanish. When did those humans become so powerful? Spread out and look. The fortress city is so big that it can't have been removed in a single day. It must be hidden nearby, or someone must have put an invisibility spell on it. It is here, but we can't see it. Beta signaled with his hand for his troops to search for the city. He had previously boasted that invading the fortress city was like playing around. Then, he encountered such a big obstacle. That caused him to look foolish in front of his elves. Furthermore, he had put forth a lot of work to break past the 9 walls. He wished to unleash his rage on the fortress city's citizens. "When I reach the fortress city, I will kill Watson and all those who are related to him. I will also murder half of the city's inhabitants. I have squandered so much energy. Killing half the people in the city should not be a problem, right?" As he whispered gently, Beta's eyes were filled with darkness. His mouth was slightly twisted, and the exposed sharp teeth were continually rubbing against each other, generating ear-piercing sounds. He was not idle while he was speaking. He directed the zombie skeletons beneath him to attack the surrounding area, particularly the 3 gods' remains. Each of them had launched a distinct form of divine kingdom, and each fired thousands of beams of light. Thousands of holes were left in the ground due to the attacks. The mountain divine kingdom had instantly transformed into a divine mountain and collapsed, slamming the ground with fractures. The divine kingdom of fire was much more bloodthirsty. Everything it traveled through would be reduced to a pile of charred ashes. Lava flowed aimlessly on the ground's surface. "Everyone in the fortress city, stop hiding and come out. If you come out now, I can still let you go. Otherwise, all of you will die. I'll count to 3. If you don't come out, I'll head to the other nearby cities. You don't want to watch us destroy the surrounding cities, one by one, right? Your family might be there." After the bombardment had no effect, Beta raised 3 fingers to the heavens and glanced around for any hints. Unfortunately, nothing changed in the surroundings. On the contrary, the 2 elves in charge of the search approached him and shook their heads. "I'm sorry, Lord Beta. We have looked around the area. We found no signs of the fortress city, whether in the sky or on the ground. We did not even find any evidence of magical fluctuations in the area. If you can't find it, then continue searching. We'll wait until you find it." Beta was dissatisfied with his subordinates. Just as he was ready to say something else, one of the elves raised his head in disbelief. "Look, Lord Beta, what is that?" Beta turned around and saw a pitch-black meteor flying close to the ground behind him. If one looked closely, one would discover that it was not a meteor but a spherical city. A rumbling sound could be heard as it moved. "What kind of city is that? Why does it look so strange and can move?" "Forget it. It's not easy to see a city after entering the barrier. I can't let it go. Maybe the people inside are related to the fortress city." With that in mind, Beta flew into the skies and fearlessly opened his arms toward the city that was approaching him. "I am sorry, I..." With a loud bang, before Beta could even finish speaking, his entire body collided with the city that was flying past him. His body exploded into a cloud of blood mist on the spot, just like a mosquito that was nailed to the wall by a fly swatter. Chapter 548, Planetary Fortress Legion. Whoosh! The humming of the enormous city continued unabated after Beta's corpse was destroyed. It traveled quickly along the starlight barrier's orbit and into the distance. Beta was killed in the collision. The elves stared blankly at the exploding crimson mist in the air. Beta, who was so confident that a spherical metropolis could easily annihilate the gods' remains, did not even see the city clearly. That spherical city's speed and power are too terrifying. Most importantly, is there no one in the city? They didn't even come out to take a look after crushing a person, the rest of the elves ridiculed. At that moment, Beta, who had been crushed into a blood mist in midair and blown away by the high-speed whirlwind caused by the city's movement, was floating in midair. The blood beads were constantly squirming and merging, returning Beta to his original appearance. He appeared considerably weaker than before. Veins were visible on his pale face, and his blood vessels were bulging. "How dare those blasted humans ignore me like that? They must have a connection somewhere. How dare they bump into me?" Beta's back had bone wings as he screamed violently. He was about to take flight and pursue the city. Delta grimaced. "Wait, Beta, what are you doing? We're here on a secret mission to capture Watson. For that reason, we have to hide our identity as assassins. It's one thing for you to stop the city forcefully, but now you want to chase after them. Do you want to expose us and fight head-on with the humans?" They were assassins. An assassin's guiding philosophy was to fulfill a mission by any means necessary. Those who engaged in open combat with others were not assassins but knights. So what if we expose ourselves? We just have to ask where the fortress city is. After confirming its location, we can rush in to complete the mission. Only the lowest level assassins are required to keep their identities hidden. This is the ideal infiltration as long as we are strong enough to murder everyone. Beta, do you really dare to say that? That's what you said before we arrived at the fortress city, right? What happened then? After we arrived here, we did not even get to see the city's silhouette. We wasted half a day trying to break through the barrier. I feel that the fortress city is different from a day ago. There must be a reason for the changes that have happened here. Before we figure it out, we should not act rashly. Delta, are you lecturing me? Before I lose my temper, I advise you to let go quickly. Beta glanced at Delta, who was grabbing his arm. Then, he shifted his gaze to Delta's face and spoke impatiently. It was hard for him, as a top-tier assassin, not to understand what Delta was saying. However, he could not endure the humiliation of being crushed in front of so many elves. He was tens of times stronger than he had been. He could even command the gods' remains and wield the power of death. Who else could be that strong in the world? He was already so powerful that he could not keep his rage in check after being attacked. He wanted to use his strength to convey what was truly terrifying to the residents of the fortress city. Delta pursed her lips and unwillingly let go of Beta's body, sensing the unchangeable intention in Beta's words. She allowed the hard bone armor to appear on Beta's body as he controlled the undead army to fly into the sky. "Lady Delta, what should we do now?" After Beta left, an elf came to Delta's side and asked helplessly. What else are we able to do? Let us go with him. We had a difficult time breaking through the 9 barriers. Beta is the only one who can break through them. If something happens to him, we can forget about the king's assignment for us, let alone to leave this place. In the sky, the former fortress city had transformed into a planetary fortress. You are quite fortunate. As the first set of warriors chosen to guard the 9 planetary fortresses, you will receive a handsome reward of 10,000 gold coins every year and complimentary potions produced by His Highness Watson with water from the Golden River water. Those potions are known as Dragon Transformation Potion and Blessings of the Angels and Devils. I will get them to you right away. You should thank His Highness Watson for his efforts and see him as the one most likely to repay you. Do you get it? A group of armored soldiers stood neatly at the planetary fortress city's gate, staring straight ahead. Fox stood in front of them, holding a box of potions and instructions. Many of the potions in the package in his palm radiated a powerful aura. There were faint phantoms of various species of dragons on them. Some of them were black and white beads with an ancient aura in them. It was a blessing from the gods that made it happen. When they saw those potions, the over 1,000 soldiers there gulped before they responded politely in unison, "Yes, Lord Fox." Your Highness Watson, do you think it's okay for me to say that? Do you have anything else to add? Fox nodded in satisfaction. His serious expression turned to flattery as he asked Watson, who was standing beside him. Then I will add something else. The 9 planetary fortresses I have built are now the Holy Dragon Kingdom's outer defense line. The soldiers at the top may not be able to come home more than once a year. As a result, people who have a family or are inconvenienced can withdraw from this. Watson took a peek around. When they heard his comments, all soldiers heaved their chests. There was no hesitation, and no one opted to leave. Watson had just finished building the 9 planetary fortresses, which shook the entire city. Fox had gathered the whole city to make an announcement. Watson wanted to pick qualified troops from the city to live in the other 8 planetary fortresses, continually monitoring the situation at the kingdom's numerous boundaries. They would be known as the Planetary Fortress Corps. It indicated that the warriors of the Corps were the experts of the Holy Dragon Kingdom's defense. With their help, the Holy Dragon Kingdom would be invincible. In addition to the glorious title of Planetary Fortress Corps, the selected soldiers also had the right to obtain resources from Watson for free. Those resources included potions that could grant people eternal life. Those potions could allow people to be promoted to Diamond Tier dragons, as well as armor and weapons that were no weaker than Platinum Tier. They would not have believed such a condition if it had been provided to them in the past. They might even think the other party has gone insane. However, since Watson had made the announcement, they had no reason to disbelieve him. It was not a disadvantage to be unable to return home in the face of such enormous benefits. As soon as Watson's words left his mouth, everyone in the city flocked to the selection process in an attempt to pass and become a member of the Holy Dragon Kingdom's encirclement. It was not for glory but because Watson had given them too much. There were too many people who had signed up, so Fox had no choice but to choose 1,000 outstanding soldiers from the army as the vanguard. After giving them the medicine, Watson was about to send them to other planetary fortresses. Chapter 549, 10 Minutes to Catch the Intruder. As soldiers guarding the kingdom, you must not only face loneliness, but you must also be continuously on the lookout for foreign attackers. That is not an easy task. I will send people to assess you on occasion. If they discover that you do not fulfill the requirements, I will replace you at any time. Do you understand? Watson marched around the planetary fortress's gate, his hands behind his back. The soldiers' expressions became solemn as a result of his statements. If some of those soldiers were only searching for perks and did not intend to work hard, they would have to think about it after hearing his words. They had enough benefits, so adequate punishment was also necessary. Only by demonstrating mercy and force would those soldiers be obedient. Your Highness Watson, I have a question. A soldier tentatively raised his hand. What is your question? I want to know about the criteria and qualifications. It is quite straightforward. You need to promptly get the opposing kingdom's troop movements and prevent them from crossing the Starlight Barrier. However, if the opposing kingdom's spies infiltrate our kingdom, you've failed in your duty. Of course, it would be even better if you could anticipate the situation and take the initiative to apprehend the enemy's assassins and spies. I will reward you. I see. In that case, I have something to report, young Master Watson. Just now, the city seemed to have collided with something while it was moving. I vaguely saw a figure hit the city. The Planetary Fortress has already circled the surrounding cities. The residents have been warned not to appear on the city's trajectory. The figure I saw might be an assassin from the enemy kingdom. What's your name? Watson asked the soldier who asked the question with a smile. Your Highness, my name is Colette. Colette, you are able to sense when the city had hit a person, and you even analyzed their identity. You've done well. From now on, you can be the leader of the kingdom's garrison stationed at the Planetary Fortress. In view of your outstanding performance just now, I'll also give you a weapon. A book materialized in his hand as he spoke. The book had numerous bronze and silver weaponry. He activated the fusion system and forged them into a diamond tier longsword. Diamond tier weapon, Eternally Frozen Rose's Edge. Effects: Bloom Rose, Diamond tier spell, can turn an area into a snow and ice environment. Power of Ice, increases the effect of that weapon by 50% in a snow and ice environment. Absolute Freeze, Diamond tier rule, can freeze enemies. Additional effects: Ice Armor Plating, when holding that sword, a layer of ice plating will automatically appear on the body, making it immune to most damage and resistant to control elemental skills. The long sword measured more than a meter in length and half a meter in width. The blade's center was hollowed out, and within it were 3 diamonds that emitted a bright light. The chill in the air was menacing. At the bottom of the blade, a ring-shaped armguard in the shape of a snow crown floated. Rose blooms condensed from snowflakes could be spotted in the vicinity of the armguard. The entire sword appeared to be gorgeous. Everyone's attention was drawn to it the moment it appeared. Watson weighed the long sword in his hand. Feeling the bone-piercing cold air coming from it, he nodded in satisfaction and threw it to Colette. That diamond tier weapon is called the Eternally Frozen Rose's Edge. It has a great effect on those who cultivate a fire elemental combat aura or an ice elemental combat aura. Thank you, Your Highness Watson. Colette joyfully accepted the long sword and knelt on one knee, respectfully. He was an ice elemental warrior. Watson had not only given him a diamond tier longsword, but it had also been custom made to match the fighting aura trait that he had nurtured. That act had a profound effect on him. He was once only an average squad leader in the fortress city. During the latest Elven army attack, his brother was unfortunately killed. Fortunately, Watson was able to resurrect him using the human chess piece. He and his brother had joined the Planetary Fortress army to show their appreciation to Watson. However, he was the only one picked by Fox. If I have immense power, I can keep my family and friends safe. I assumed that becoming the Planetary Fortress army would help me reach my goal, but unexpectedly, my power has far exceeded my expectations. Even if the Elven army attacks again, I will be able to overcome them. It is all because of His Highness Watson. Colette gazed at Watson while clutching the rose blade. The young man in front of him had a delicate face, but that was enough for him to devote his life to him. There had been various speculations spreading throughout the city in the last several days due to His Majesty King Landar III's arrival. They said that Watson was not King Landar III's son. He lacked the bloodline of the Holy Dragon Kingdom's royal family. King Landar III, on the other hand, had abandoned the 3 princes and appointed Watson as the next king. Perhaps, it was because he was too exceptional. Even King Landar III could give up the throne for Watson, let alone ordinary soldiers like them. It was an honor to be appreciated by Watson. There were certainly a lot of soldiers who felt that way. Many of them were envious of Colette. All right, the weapons have been distributed. Now it's time to capture that suspicious intruder. This operation will be your first mission. I will reward anyone who can capture the intruder. Your Highness Watson, rest assured that I will complete the mission. Following Colette's example, the soldiers were all rubbing their fists and full of battle spirit. Some of the vexed soldiers turned around and prepared to flee. Thankfully, the people beside them reminded them, and they quickly turned around. After Fox gave them the dragon transformation potion and the blessings of the gods and demons, they drank the 2 potions. Boom! The streets in front of the planetary stronghold trembled with a muted sound. Every soldier's body radiated powerful auras. Those troops initially sprouted angel wings on their backs, followed by dragon scales beneath their skin. The troops transformed into dragons with various forms and angel wings in a short amount of time. Dragon roars continued to reverberate across the city. So those potions did indeed have the power to change people into diamond-tier dragons. It doesn't seem like there are any side effects. Fox looked up at the sky, blankly. After a while, he frustratedly patted his head. Watson had previously stated that he wanted to help the people improve their strength, so he had created those 2 potions. Watson had given them to him because he was concerned that the potions could have side effects, and Watson had only prepared a small portion for the Planetary Fortress army, so he had not used them. Fox would have surreptitiously hidden the second half if he realized that the 2 potions would have such tremendous effects. While Fox struggled with that, the soldiers who had transformed into dragons extended their wings and flew away. Their hearts were as excited as Fox, but they understood that it was not the time to be sidetracked. Watson had stated that whoever caught the intruders would be rewarded. They would not be able to acquire it if they were late. Watson's prize was unquestionably excellent. Even a diamond-tier weapon was sufficient to drive them insane. Thousands of massive dragons rose into the sky. That was a fantastic scene. Many city dwellers stopped what they were doing and gazed up. Let's go, we're going to. A whirlwind appeared beneath his feet when Watson put his hands behind his back. It lifted him into the air. Fox's back sprouted a pair of fighting aura wings, and he flew upward too. Your Highness Watson, I do not know if there are any more of those 2 potions. If there are any left, I don't know if I will. Oh? Do you want them as well? These 2 potions are explicitly made for the Planetary Fortress army. Do you wish to join the army? Well, it just so happens that the army is in need talented individual who is skilled at management and overall planning. Watson glanced at Fox as a hesitant look appeared on Fox's face. Your Highness, I don't want to join the Planetary Fortress army. He only wanted to obtain 2 types of potions. After all, he was a city lord with a high position and authority, and he had a wife and children at home. It was hard for him to give them up. If you don't want to do that, then you'll have to wait if you want the potions. I plan to release the potions to the city's citizens once the entire Planetary Fortress army has been outfitted with them. After this batch of troops, I hope to recruit another 100,000 soldiers. Watson noticed Fox's face darkening as he spoke. But I can give you a chance. Let's bet on how long the Planetary Fortress army will take to apprehend the assassins. If you win, I will give you a potion right away. What do you think? Was there such a good thing? Fox first widened his eyes, then he hurriedly said, Your Highness Watson, I shall bet 10 minutes. Within 10 minutes, those Planetary Fortress soldiers will definitely catch the intruders. Chapter 550, The Powerful Beta. Following his response, Fox carefully examined Watson's expression, as if he was scared Watson would break his word. The intruders would be apprehended in 10 minutes, that was his modest estimate. After consuming the dragon transformation potion, those Planetary Fortress soldiers had gained the might of the diamond-tier dragon race, as well as the blessing of the gods and demons. How might an immortal diamond tier elite destroy them then? They also had about 1,000 of those elites. They would not be able to resist such a great lineup, no matter who the intruders were. His Majesty Watson said that he would not give me the potion because he wanted to prioritize the troops. Then, he made a sure-win bet with me. That is the same as giving it to me for free. Perhaps he thinks highly of me and considers me to be exceptional, which is why he did that. Just as he was contemplating that, Watson exclaimed, "Lord Fox, I bet the Planetary Fortress army will not be able to apprehend the intruders. Since it is a game of chance, I can't be the only one using my chips. If you lose, you must agree to my proposal. Is that okay?" "That's fine." Without hesitation, Fox consented. Watson's statements confirmed his earlier beliefs. Even if the Elven King returned with his army, it would be no match for the Planetary Fortress army. He had absolutely no chance of losing. While flying, the two of them talked. They had already flown out of the Planetary Fortress at that point. Thousands of massive dragons were soaring above the stronghold. The dragons were either flailing their massive front claws or opening their mouths to breathe fire. The sky was filled with a turmoil of chaotic energy. An elf in white armor with a scythe-like tail stood amid those dragons. That elf appeared to be encircled by dragons and could be killed at will. However, the reality was quite the contrary. A fracture emerged on the earth as the elf waved his hand. 100-meter-long white bone palm reached out from the crack and grabbed a soldier who had transformed into a dragon. The soldier could not break free, no matter how hard he tried. Soon, the arm connected to the back of the white bone palm. Then, something crawled out of the ground, revealing the 1,000-meter-tall body. That was the body of a long-dead giant. It was missing its right arm and 2 legs. Everything below the knees was gone. The giant's head also had a massive hole in it. It was clear that it was once a part of his eye, but it was blazing with a green ghost flame. Roar! The huge skeleton displayed its teeth hanging upside down like mountains by opening its cavernous mouth. It erupted in a roar that shook the sky and the earth. The dragon's torso was then gripped in its palm by fingers that resembled sky-supporting pillars. It gradually converted that into a heap of meat paste. After that, the enormous skeleton hurled the body in its hand and snatched at the other dragons flying in the sky. All of the other dragons swerved. The elf in the center waved their arms again, seeing that the gigantic skeleton could not hit the dragons. Smaller skeletons materialized one after the other, bearing guns and shields, under the crevices in the enormous skeleton had climbed out of. Their backs sprouted bone wings, and they flew into the sky, entangling with the dragons. The sound of the air being torn apart could be heard continuously. The skeletons appeared like a blowout. If the gigantic dragons were humans, those skeletons would have been like ants at the time. They could bite an elephant to death if there were more ants. From a distance, the bodies of each dragon appeared to be almost entirely covered in skeletons that had stained their original bodies white. Even though the soldiers who had turned into huge dragons could smash thousands of skeletons with each strike and kill them, there were simply too many skeletons. There were also skeletons resembling the giants that had recently emerged. The number of huge arms waving in the sky grew, and only a few giant dragons could avoid it in time. The white bone's palm smashed the other into meat paste right away. How is that intruder so powerful, and he even has the ability to control the dead? A Planetary Fortress soldier who had transformed into a dragon spoke in human language. The dragon's eyes were filled with shock. He clearly saw a comrade who had been hit by white bone's arms that were 100 meters wide and turned into meat paste. His bones broke free, and ghostly flames appeared in his eyes. Then, he transformed into a bone dragon and attacked them instead. No one could comprehend that their former ally had become an adversary. They had planned to capture the intruders so that they could easily fulfill the objective, but they realized that they were mistaken. What's going on? Where did that elf come from? How could he fight against thousands of dragons at the same time? Also, why did he resurrect the dead soldiers? Your Highness Watson, Didn't you say that the blessing of the gods and demons potions you created can grant one eternal life if one drank it? The effect will be the same as the elves who had taken water from the spring of life. Fox stood behind Watson, looking at the Planetary Fortress army, a disadvantage in the sky. He seemed a little agitated. The blessing of the gods and demons can grant one an eternal life and prevent death by ordinary means. However, this does not imply they will not perish. Eternal life was also granted to the gods of ancient times. Didn't they also perish in the war? Watson's voice was calm, but there was a tinge of anticipation. Our opponents would certainly manage the rule of death. The effect of spring has been eliminated in the face of the law of death. Aside from that, the invader possesses additional special talents. I didn't expect such a tough competitor in the elven race. Fox, sensing the interest in Watson's tone, looked as though he wanted to cry, but he had no tears. He could only bet Watson that the Planetary Fortress army would destroy the enemy in 10 minutes. Well, it looked like he would lose that bet in 10 minutes. He was beginning to worry that the Planetary Fortress army could not repel the assault and that the Planetary Fortress city would be in jeopardy. Do not be alarmed, everyone. Let us get and not allow those skeleton soldiers to surround us. We will not be swamped by the masses this way. A dragon with a snow-white body covered in frost scales led the 1,000 dragons in the sky. It was named the Frost Prison Monster, and it was Colette's dragon. At the time, his front claws were grasping the diamond tier rose blade, which had also grown in size. A massive snow-white sword aura engulfed them. The skeletons had dissolved to dust. Even the arms of the giants could not withstand a single blow from that sword aura and were split into 2 halves. Hearing Colette's voice, the remaining gigantic dragons approached him in a circle, one after the other. The skeletons could not encircle such a significant number of giant dragons at once. They could only attack the bigger dragons, causing them to turn to ash. Soon, there was a clear area in the sky. We will use a lot of energy if we continue battling like this, even if we win. The intruder has summoned those skeletons. All we have to do now is kill him. He flew in the direction of the elves at the same time. That mystery invader was stronger than he had anticipated, but he was no pushover. He had just received a gift from Watson, and then, he possessed a strength that was countless times greater than her previous strength. He was filled with confidence as a result of his great power. The captain is correct. As long as we catch those invading skeletons, they will vanish naturally. Be more diligent. First, get rid of any skeletons that are in the way. At the absolute least, we cannot allow them to approach the citadel. With the speed of the Planetary Fortress, we will be out of here in a matter of minutes. The other soldiers cheered under Colette's encouragement and flew toward the elves. Some cast magic, and some cast the unique absolute reflection from the angel race, useful in repelling the skeletons. Even though the elves summoned more skeletons to protect themselves, they were still unable to stop the dragons from approaching. The fighting scenario had been quite short, at least for the time being. You seem to think that you'll win as long as you get close to me. Sorry, that is just your imagination. If you get close to me, you'll die even more miserably. A cold, mocking voice sounded in the air. The elves did not even dodge when they saw the giant dragons the soldiers had transformed into approaching them. Instead, they sneered, "Release the 3 divine kingdoms of the dead." Boom! Boom! After a series of loud bangs, 3 skeleton figures emitting divine light suddenly appeared in the sky. 3 giant divine kingdoms emerged along with the skeletons. They were made of flames, mountains, and light. The enormous explosion swallowed the entire Planetary Fortress army, covering the entire sky.